in people's heart, making them think that you will die, or the enemy will steal your health, your wealth, or whatever, or you are a thief if you don't tithe. It's all a lie. Please do not believe them. Do you tithe? Do you not tithe? Let me know in the comment section. With love in Christ, John Henry with the Gospel of Christ.
All right. I think we are back. We had quite a bit of technical problems around the intermission time, and we came back and finally got our video back up. We were strictly on the radio for a few minutes. We apologize for that, but completely out of our hands on that. So we did the best that we could. We do have Brother Dan Curtis, a pastor of Community Missionary Baptist Church in Nashville City, Tennessee, back on with us. He is our other guest co-host. Welcome back, Brother Dan. You did not hear all of what...
Glad to be here. Glad to be here. Good times.
Good to have you. You did get to hear all of the video that was being played. Of course, it wasn't a video to us. It was only audio. But the basic premise of this video was, if you don't pay your tithes, you're going to be susceptible to demonic invasion, possession, that type of thing. And those first fellows that were on, I think all you heard was John MacArthur. The first fellows were using tithing actually as a I guess you would say a scare tactic. Yes, thank you, Brother John. A scare tactic to who knows with what to do with people. So the questions that, and I texted you, brethren, earlier today, asking you to be prepared for this discussion. So for the rest of our time, I'd like us to focus on a core amount of questions concerning tithing. Number one, is it scriptural? Number two, is it applicable to the New Testament? Number three, what about us today? Does it apply to us today? If it does, fine. If it doesn't, then what are we to give? What amount are we to give? So these basic questions, brethren, if you would, and I'm going to let Brother Dan Curtis go first and give us your thoughts here, brother.
Thank you. I had some notes, and I'm going to start off with the basics. I'm a real basic grassroots person. Why do people give? Now, we're not necessarily talking about tithe or anything else, but why do people give? You know, whenever we see parents, we do our best to give the best to our children. But I think that's the root of it. Why do we give? I think in the New Testament church, we sometimes can come about it the wrong way. But I will answer the question you had. Is it applicable or scriptural to the New Testament church? I'll go out on a crazy limb and say no, it's not. But I don't know it will struggle in giving and tithing. All right. So why do people give? But then the other is why do people not give? One of the lessons I learned when I started pastoring is that I made a statement to the congregation. I said, if this church is not something that you believe is about the work of the Lord, I don't blame you for not tithing. I don't blame you for not giving. Sometimes I'm going to be a little bit unpopular when I say this, but we have to think like people think. People want to help people. People want Christian brothers and sisters. They want to give to the Lord. But if they don't see the money, the love offerings, and the tithe going to the Lord, like you mentioned, it's going to the people get rich to the top. We've completely lost our way. But I will tell you this: if someone struggles with tithing, they struggle with everything in their Christian walk. Fruit
Very true.
of your heart to the Lord. In other words, first of all, teach you. You all know this. Teach you something. The first about tithing is you have to acknowledge and understand that none of it is yours to begin with.
Right.
It's not your money. It's amazing that God trusts us with His money, His finances, His time, His talents, and all that we are in Him. So why would we rationalize as 10% enough or 20% enough? The last time I checked, God wants all of it. He wants everything. So some of those times talk. We've all heard this most of our life growing up in church. You cannot outgive God. But we say that, but then we give sparingly, and I believe it's because we don't believe that God can replace it. In other words, somehow we're going to run out of God's money. And so, with that said, when we are stewards of God's finances, then we will be joyful in giving all of it away if it's needed. Because God will prove to you when you're a good steward, God will prove to you that He will provide more for you to give. That's what I love. And I think this video we're talking about is tithes so we can get rich. I know what God thinks about that kind of tithing. I would say you just keep that. If you I don't need your money. He wants you to give from a love from the heart, and give believing that you everything is, and that He will provide more. God's got plenty of money. And that's the last I'll say on that.
All right, brother. I'm glad you shared with us. So what you are saying, I think, is, well, I won't try to say what you're saying. You said it well enough. And brother John, are you still with us there?
Yes.
Okay. I know that you had prepared something as well on this subject, so we'll let you go at it, brother. Go ahead.
Not a problem. And many times during this conversation, we're going to use the word tithes. This is just a habitual thing. We're not, just because we're not trying to be hypocritical when we say it. It's a term that's been used most of our lives. And so it's worked into our vocabulary. We try to replace it with the word offerings as much as we want, but we're still occasionally going to slip up and call it tithes. That's not our condoning it or anything like that. And it's also amazing how many churches there are that simply will not preach the Old Testament. They stay in the Gospels because we're a New Testament church, they say. But they'll bring tithes in from the Old Testament, and that's no big deal because that's money. During prayer meeting back in the early 1960s at Sunset Drive Baptist Church, as the first church I was brought up in, we just finished a song when the power went out. Minister came up and cracked a little bit of a joke and said, "You know what? This is a good time to take up an offering." Congregation wasn't too sure how to react to that. A few laughed with him, but some acted like this was a threat or something. It kind of got serious. We've read about churches that have launched building projects, and to make sure that the project could be financed, had asked for membership to make a written commitment to tithing, which might seem all right to some, but if hardship falls upon a member, they were still expected to come up with their tithe because they had committed to it. I don't know what the punishment was if they didn't, but it is things like this that has turned many off to giving to the Lord. Collections should not be treated as pledging. Some of these ministers rarely preach from the Old Testament, except when it comes to finances, occasionally a story about Jonah, things like that. They forget what Jesus said about finances. They instead instill what Moses taught from the law. And tonight we're going to look at the difference between Old Testament tithing and New Testament collections. This will remind us of another difference between the law and grace, and how attitude fits into the equation. The question was asked, what was a tithe in the Old Testament? The Hebrews were commanded to give a mayasir, or a tithe. This wasn't limited to money. It included cattle, fruit, grain, wine, oil, and even their land. We consider it part of our paycheck. That's what we consider our quote-unquote tithe. If you give 10% of what you earn that week, then all's good. That's not scriptural. Reading Leviticus chapter 27, beginning at verse 30. And all the tithe of the land, whether of the seed of the land or of the fruit of the tree, is the Lord's. It is holy unto the Lord. And if a man will at all redeem aught of his tithes, he shall add thereto the fifth part thereof. Fifth. And concerning the tithe of the herd or the flock, even of whatsoever passeth under the rod, the tenth shall be holy unto the Lord. Who here has given a tenth of their car to God? We admittedly have given a lot of gas toward it. That's reading Deuteronomy chapter 14, beginning at verse 22. Thou shalt surely tithe all the increase of thy seed, that the fruit bringeth forth, or that the field bringeth forth year by year. Thou shalt eat before the Lord thy God, in the place which he shall choose to place his name there, the tithe of thy corn, of thy wine, and of thy oil, and the firstlings of thy herds and of thy flocks, that thou mayest learn to fear the Lord thy God always. Some of us as parents have always wished that God had mentioned the tithe of our firstborn children, but we'll leave that alone. If we observe what a Jewish tithe was and compare it to what many toss into the collection plate these days, we can see that what we are giving can't even be called a tithe because it doesn't qualify. The New Testament term, what we give, is properly called a collection. Now, how often was it collected? Hebrews didn't tithe each week because of the complexity of their tithing and all the goods involved. God had set it up such a way that the Levites, priests, and poor were all taken care of without time of a shortfall. There were barns and other ways of storing the surplus, so this was no problem. Some teach that tithing was done once per year. Some say it was done quarterly. The Bible doesn't seem to spell out the appointed time, at least not in the Old Testament. So how should we give? Old Testament tithing, part of the law. It wasn't a request, a proposal, a suggestion, an afterthought, or a wish. It was a commandment. It wasn't limited to money, as we've read. It could be expensive. Of course, if you tithe 10 heads of cattle, that means you have 90 to do with as you choose. So you'd think that the more you tithe back then, the richer you'd become. So tithing should be easy. Nowhere are church members commanded to tithe. Again, it's part of the law. But we are stewards, specifically God's stewards. We have been bought with a price. All that we own is, in reality, God's possession. Brother Dan pointed that out, which he allows us to hold on to and use as we choose. Read in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 7, every man according as he proposeth in his heart, so let him give, not grudgingly, or of necessity, for God loveth a cheerful giver. God does not give us a percentage to work with. He allows us to choose the amount, but because we want to, not because we have to. Those who choose not to give aren't breaking any commandments, but they are missing great blessings as well as holding back the work of God by not helping to finance it. Now, some will say that Malachi 3 and 8 does not apply as tithes are no longer commanded. Whether or not it does, Malachi 3:10 speaks of God's house, which is one of the references to the church. And it says there, "Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house." That is the Old Testament part. This is the part that carries over, really. "Prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it." My father used to always say that many church members say they didn't tithe because they couldn't afford to. I always told him he gave because he couldn't afford not to. Giving freely to God is acknowledging his lordship, our servitude, and our dependence. These are all good things that we should do anyway. Matthew 10 and 8 says, "Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out devils." This was part of the limited commission. But it also says, "Freely ye have received, freely give." Now we can give either for the glory and awards of man or for the glory and reward of God. God's rewards, much greater, last so much longer because they carry past the grave. When we freely give, the feeling we receive is God-given. It is the way he has made us because it is the way he is. Just as we try to give our children things that make them happy as well as making their life fuller, God desires to do this to us, and when we do freely give, he loves to reward us. In conclusion, collections are voluntary. They are commanded. If they were commanded, our attitude toward them wouldn't matter. We would just be obeying a commandment. Many ministries might frown at this attitude concerning collections, but remember Paul's wording for his first epistle to the church at Corinth. He said in 1 Corinthians 16 and 2, "Upon the first day of the week, tithemi," Greek word, "every one of you lay by him in store as God hath prospered him, so there be no gatherings when they come." That word is important. The word tithemi is passive. He did not use the Greek word histemi, which is active, as it would be if it were a commandment. Where the collections commandment, the active word would have been used. God wishes all collections to be given because we wish to give, not because we're forced to. The end.
All right. Thank you, brother. Appreciate that. And you as well, Brother Dan. So I think we're coming to the conclusion to, is that in the Old Testament, it was commanded. Tithe, as been pointed out, was a tenth, and the Jews were to give a tenth, as Brother John pointed out, not just their money, it was everything else. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we forget that the purpose of the tithe in the Old Testament, the priesthood had to be supported in some way, because they were not, when they reached the land that God had given to them, the tribe of Levi, which was the priestly tribe, not all of them were priests, by the way, but all of the tribe of Levi was involved in, shall we say, the physical, spiritual matters of the tabernacle and then later on the temple. Well, they weren't given a heritage like the other tribes were. So God
was their heritage.
Right. God instituted the tithe in order that this tribe, the whole tribe of Levi, not just the priesthood, but the whole tribe of Levi would be supported. They were, as we would say, full-time in the ministry. All right? Their full-time responsibilities were things connected with the tabernacle and then later on the temple. And so they didn't have time to make a living, if you will. So that was, God commanded the rest of the tribes to tithe a tenth of everything in order that the tribe of Levi could be supported and be able to do the things that God had intended for them to do. When we come down into the New Testament time, as we well know, tithe was part of the law. It was part of the law of Moses. Well, the Bible is clear in its teaching that the law was done away with when Jesus died on the cross. He fulfilled the law, took it away. Well, there went tithing then. So how do we then apply it to the New Testament? Well, you'll find that those members at the Church of Jerusalem, there in the book of Acts, in the beginnings of the first several chapters of the book of Acts, you'll find that they were selling everything that they had, and they were putting it into the treasury of the church in Jerusalem. And the dispute that came in that resulted in the selection of deacons was to be able to take care of those physical matters of the church of Jerusalem, because the apostles were having to spend most of their time in taking care of the physical matters of the church, and they were not being able to study and to do what they needed to do as the ministers and the preachers and the teachers of the church. So these 7 men were selected as deacons to take care of those physical matters. All right. And part of that, I believe, is not stated in the scriptures, but it's believed by most that everyone was given, all the church was given according to their needs. Well, the only problem with all of that, when they have sold everything they have and given it into the treasury of the church, and they've all done this, eventually that pot's going to run out. And that's what happened. You find later on in the book of Acts, it's talked about that Paul and Silas were selected to take an offering that had been gathered up. They had been selected to take that offering to the church at Jerusalem because they were in dire need. They were suffering, not only because of a drought and other things and persecution, but the money had run out. And they had no way of replacing that. Well, I don't think that a tithe would have been enough. But how does that apply to us today? I think these brethren have very plainly showed us that for today, the tithe is no longer, we're not under the law, because the law never was for Gentiles to begin with, but it's been done away with. So it doesn't, that requirement doesn't even exist anymore. Albeit, as was pointed out in the video, each time that the tithe was mentioned in the scriptures, it did not apply to our situation as believers, nor to the New Testament saints. So what was the rule of thumb? Well, I believe, and I think this is probably the way that most of us believe, that we're not under the law to give a tithe or to give a tenth of what we have. And as Brother John pointed out, we usually think of the 10% as far as the money that we have, and we don't apply it to hardly anything else. But if we just even keep that, I think that most of us have established that the tithe is a good benchmark to start with. Don't ever give less than that 10%. And if and don't limit it to 10%. If God blesses you so that you can give more than that 10%, then that's what we ought to do. So I appreciate you, brethren, sharing all of this. I think the subject's been covered pretty good tonight. And I thank you so much. I apologize for the technical problems that we had, but as I said earlier, it's out of our hands. Sometimes computers and things.
This isn't Jamie's fault.
No, it's not Jamie's fault. No, he was working frantically out there trying